Hey, Mike.
Hey, Kṛṣṇa, how are you today?
I'm good. Just digging out my car. It's been buried for a couple of weeks. Got to go to get my blood work done tomorrow, so I can go see a doctor, even though I don't have any insurance. It's going to be kind of expensive, but I think it's probably cheaper to do it that way than this current scam that the government has with the Medicare Part B. And even in Medicare, like if you're over 65 and you have to enroll in Medicare Part B, that would cost me $189 a month plus the supplemental insurance. It's it could be like $400 a month, just for me. And and so I'm just going to take my chances. I only see a doctor like once every 6 months, but you have to see him in order to continue your prescriptions and stuff. This is just for your information when you get older, which everybody does at an increasing rate, it seems. Okay, so we're on text 10, I believe.
Sounds right. Yeah.
You see that?
Yep, just popped up.
Okay. Okay, go for it.
Okay, text 10. Ramani adhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yam lipyatenas papena padma patram ivam basa. Synonyms. Ramani, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Daya, resigning. Karmani, all works. Sangam, attachment. Tyaktva, giving up. Karoti, performs. Ya, who. Lipyate, is affected. Na, never. Sa, he. Papena, by sin. Padma patram, a lotus leaf. Iva, like. Ambasa, by the water. Translation. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. Keep going.
Go ahead.
Okay. Purport. Here, Brahmani means in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. The material world is a sum total manifestation of the three modes of material nature, technically called the pradhana. The Vedic hymns, Sarvan He Aitad Brahma, Madhukya Upanishad 2, Tasmad Aitad Brahma Nana Rupam Anam Cha Jayate, Mundaka Upanishad 119, and in the Bhagavad-gītā 14.3, Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma, indicate that everything in the material world is a manifestation of Brahman. And although the effects are differently manifested, they are non-different from the cause. In the Upanishad, it is said that everything is related to the Supreme Brahman or Krishna, and thus everything belongs to him only. One who knows perfectly well that everything belongs to Krishna, that he is the proprietor of everything, and that, therefore, everything is engaged in the service of the Lord, naturally has nothing to do with the results of his activities, whether virtuous or sinful. Even one's material body, being a gift of the Lord for carrying out a particular type of action, can be engaged in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. It is then beyond contamination by sinful reactions, exactly as the lotus leaf, though remaining in the water, is not wet. The Lord also says in the Gita 3:30, Maya sarvani karmani sannyasa. Resign all works unto me, Krishna. The conclusion is that a person without Kṛṣṇa consciousness acts according to the concept of the material body and senses. But a person in Kṛṣṇa consciousness acts according to the knowledge that the body is the property of Krishna and should therefore be engaged in the service of Krishna.
Yeah, this actually is the path to lead one to the highest perfection, because the ultimate goal of all activity is to renounce our own activities and accept Krishna's sole desire and, take refuge in him alone. So that is the process of Kṛṣṇa consciousness. And I was just reading the last chapter. I finished the last chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I just wanted to show you something here that I read, which was kind of striking. See this GIF here?
Yep.
It's this is the verse that kind of struck me, because it says, the pure devotional service in Vrindavan is like the golden particles in the river Jambu, like these golden particles here, It kind of reminded me of this GIF, so I put that in there. You ever heard of Jambu, the river Jambu?
I have not now.
Have you ever been downtown? You've seen that smoothie shop called Jambu Juice?
Yeah.
It's named after that.
Okay.
And so in Vrindavan, which is Krishna's abode, there's not a trace of personal sense gratification. In other words, nobody in Vrindavan has their own material desires in mind. They are only focused on Krishna's pleasure, Krishna's happiness. They don't care about their own happiness. And this verse is in an explanation of the 8th verse, the last verse of the last prayer in the Śikṣāṣtaka prayers, wherein Lord Srimati Radharani says, Ashleishva paratam panashtamam madarshanam marmatam karotava yatatava viditatu vampato mat pranastu saevana para, which means, Krishna, you can embrace me, you can neglect me, you can, make me brokenhearted by not being present before me. Whatever you do, it doesn't matter, because you're always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has written the 8th verse of the Śikṣāṣtaka prayers and explained its meaning. And it has to do with this verse that we're currently reading, because, it's actually all about, sacrificing your own sense gratification for the pleasure of Krishna. Even our own body is the property of Krishna, should be engaged in the service of Krishna. But here's the story. This is kind of an interesting story, just as a side note. There's a heavenly planet called Ilavarta, where it's on the top of this golden mountain, which is really tall. And on the top of this mountain, there's a jambu tree, which is 88,000 miles tall. And it's a big mango tree. And this is where that juice smoothie shop gets its name. The mangoes are as big as elephants, and it has very small seeds. So when the seeds like that, when the mangoes fall from that distance, the fruits fall apart, and there's so many fruits that it creates a river of jambu juice. And it says the mud on both the banks of the river of Jambu Nadi, that's the river's name, it becomes moistened by the flowing juice and then is dried by the air and sunshine and produces huge quantities of gold called Jambu Nada. See, that's what this GIF is all about. It's like golden particles. And so the denizens of heaven use this gold for various kinds of ornaments. And so all the demigods and their youthful wives are all fully decorated with golden helmets and bangles and belts. And this way they're all just like, styling up there in the spiritual world, or the heavenly planets. It's not the spiritual world, but sounds like a pretty nice place. But that's it. I like that comparison. Pure devotional service is like the golden particles of the river Jambu, because there's not a trace of personal sense gratification. And, it kind of is like an impetus for me. What it made me realize is that when you're really determining your devotional service, it doesn't matter what kind of sacrifice you undergo if you're actually focused on Krishna's happiness. There's nothing you won't do for him. So that is the mood of the gopis, and they don't have any kind of impetus for their own pleasure. And Lord Chaitanya expresses this very nicely in his explanation of that particular verse. That's an amazing chapter. You know, the whole part of last part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita is like a climax of the whole thing. All of Lord Chaitanya's activities in that last part of that chapter are completely insane, you know, full of transcendental madness. But you know, and if you're actually advanced and can understand and relish the meaning of all these different feelings that that are going through his mind, you can actually follow that, and they're very, very relishable. And they also kind of like drive you crazy too. You know, it's what it means by being mad after Krishna. You know, in other churches and stuff, people sit in their pews and they're just going, they're bored. You know, in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, there's actually life, and you know, when the devotees are chanting and dancing, they're going crazy. You know, that it's actually has life. You know, because this is a very intense process, especially when you get up into the higher emotional levels of love of Godhead. It's so intense. But I just thought that particular thing related to what we're talking about here, because you know, it's all about focusing on Krishna's happiness and not our own. That's the bottom line. Prabhupada says at the beginning of the Gita, you know, because we're not watering down this process, we're saying, okay, this is not for our sense gratification, it's for satisfying Krishna's senses. We're not watering this down, and this is why it is the Bhagavad-gītā as it is. We're just receiving this knowledge in the chain of disciplic succession from Lord Chaitanya, from Krishna to Lord Chaitanya, and he sweetens it and gives it to his disciples, and it's just becomes sweeter and sweeter as it's passed down, and it's exactly as it is. There's nothing changing in this this philosophy. It's all the same as it was spoken to Arjuna 5,000 years ago. And all we have to do is repeat what the spiritual master says, exact word for word, and then we're perfect in our Kṛṣṇa consciousness. No more, no less. Let me read this next verse here before I get off on another tangent. Text 11. Keneya manasa buddhya kevalar indriyarapi yogina karma kurvanti sangam taktvat masudaye. Kayena with the body, manasa with the mind, buddhya with the intelligence, kevalai purified, nindriya with the senses, api even, yogina Kṛṣṇa conscious persons, karma actions, kurvante they perform, sangam attachment, tyaktva giving up, atma of the self, sudhaye for the purpose of purification. Translation: the yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses only for the purpose of purification. Purport: when one acts in Kṛṣṇa consciousness for the satisfaction of the senses of Krishna, just like I was saying, you know, we're just satisfying Krishna's senses, not our own. Any action, whether the body, mind, intelligence, or even the senses, is purified of material contamination. See, this is also the meditation of the gopis. Radharani's meditation is only the happiness of Krishna's senses. She doesn't care about anything else. So that should be our constant meditation too. We should follow in the footsteps of the gopis and try to be selfless in our devotional service. And when Radharani gives her grace and gives us a taste and pushes us toward Krishna, because she thinks that everybody else is doing more service than her. So she actually helps us to become, for Krishna to accept us. You know, she'll say, oh, this person is doing much more than me. Krishna, please accept this person. So it's just a really wonderful, selfless type of thing. And it's unlimited because Krishna is attracted by devotional service. Therefore, devotional service is more powerful than Krishna himself because it's his internal energy. There are no material reactions resulting from the activities of a Kṛṣṇa conscious person. Therefore, purified activities, which are generally called sat achara, can easily be performed by acting in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 12187 describes this as follows. Actually, I'm reading this book right now. I just got done with a Chaitanya Charitamrita, so I'm rereading the Nectar of Devotion now. So, because that's a really important book too. I'm rereading the most important books of Prabhupada, and including the Sanskrit. Nectar of Devotion doesn't have the Sanskrit or Bengali, but I think it's an important enough book to read it with my a little bit more purified consciousness, because it was one of the first books that I read back in, like maybe 5 years ago. Hare iha hare yasya hare dasya karmana manasagira nilakabasyu apiyabatasu jiva mukti sauchate. A person acting in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, or in other words, in the service of Kṛṣṇa with his body, mind, intelligence, and words, is a liberated person even within this material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities, end quote. He has no false ego, for he does not believe that he's the material body or that he possesses the body. He knows that he's not this body and that this body does not belong to him. He himself belongs to Kṛṣṇa, and the body too belongs to Kṛṣṇa. And when he applies everything produced of the body, mind, intelligence, words, life, wealth, etc., whatever he may have within his possession to Kṛṣṇa's service, he is at once dovetailed with Kṛṣṇa. He is one with Kṛṣṇa and is devoid of the false ego that lead ones to believe that he's the body, etc. This is the perfect stage of Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Go ahead.
Text 12. Ita karma phalam tyaktva santim apnoti naistikam yukta kama karenam phale sakto nibadyate. Synonyms. Yukta, one who's engaged in devotional service. Karma phalam, the results of all activities. Tyaktva, giving up. Santim, perfect peace. Apnoti, achieves. Naistikam, unflinching. Ayukta, one who is not in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Kama karena, for enjoying the result of work. Phale, in the result. Sakta, attached. Nibhadyate, becomes entangled. Translation. The steady devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me, whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Purport. The difference between a person in Kṛṣṇa consciousness and a person in bodily consciousness is that the former is attached to Kṛṣṇa, whereas the latter is attached to the results of his activities. The person who is attached to Kṛṣṇa and works for him only is certainly a liberated person, and he has no anxiety over the results of his work. In the Bhagavatam, the cause of anxiety over the result of an activity is explained as being one's functioning in the conception of duality, that is, without knowledge of the absolute truth. Kṛṣṇa is the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. In Kṛṣṇa consciousness, there is no duality. All that exists is a product of Kṛṣṇa's energy, and Kṛṣṇa is all good. Therefore, activities in Kṛṣṇa consciousness are on the absolute plane. They are transcendental and have no material effect. One is therefore filled with peace in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. But one who is entangled in profit calculation for sense gratification cannot have that peace. This is the secret of Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Realization that there is no existence besides Kṛṣṇa is the platform of peace and fearlessness.
See, this is what Kṛṣṇa was explaining to Arjuna. Arjuna was all worried about what would happen if he killed all his relatives. And it was on the basis of sense gratification. Therefore, his mind was disturbed. He didn't want to kill his grandfather, or, because he wasn't in tune with Kṛṣṇa's desires. Therefore, he was attached to his own familial relations. And so Kṛṣṇa spoke the Bhagavad-gītā saying, it says here, he has no anxiety over the results of his work. Kṛṣṇa told Arjuna, victory or defeat is not your concern. Just do your duty and don't be attached to doing this or that. Loss or gain, victory or defeat, this is all up to me. So just work as your as you're inclined in your position as a warrior, and since you're executing my desire, then whatever you shouldn't be in anxiety about the result. You just because you're killing, it's not engaging in sin. Because you're doing it for me, it's not sinful anymore, because Krishna is everything and it's his desire. Therefore, whatever is against the desire of Krishna is sinful. If you don't do your duty, that would be sinful. But if you did fight and kill people on behalf of Krishna, then that's perfect. It might not be perfect in the sense of like so-called, peaceniks, that want peace in the world, but that's just nonsense, because whatever Krishna wants is perfect for everybody. There's not one thing that in the Bhagavad-gītā that is bad for any living entity. Even if you kill somebody, that is for their good. Just like in the Manu Samhita, it is said that somebody who commits a murder, they should be hanged, they should be killed, because then that will prevent them from becoming further suffering in their next life, because they haven't atoned for the sin that they've committed in this life. So it's actually good for them if they're killed. So everything that's in the Vedas is perfect for the living entity. It's prescribed, but because men are so, they want to create their own laws, and they have to change their laws every 2 seconds. And therefore it's not perfect and will never be perfect. But if they just surrender to the instructions in the Manu Samhita and the Bhagavad-gītā, then everything would be harmonious and perfect and peaceful, because they would know that there is no existence separate than Krishna. If you depend on Krishna's will and do what he wants, then you're not always in anxiety trying to figure out what's for me, and you won't be peaceful if you're always thinking of your own desires, and you'll always be in competition with other people too, because other people have their desires. But if you're in tune with Krishna's desires, then you'll be in perfect peace, because it doesn't matter. Whatever you do is protected by Krishna's, he says, he even promises that he'll protect a person who surrenders to me. So you don't have to worry about it. That way you're completely, you have no regrets, and you're not fearful of the future. And whatever you do is confirmed at every moment by Krishna within the heart, and by the Shastra, and by the spiritual master without.
Is the duality being referred to here? Is that like the idea that, we're part and parcel of Krishna, and our only means for fulfillment is to serve Krishna, but yet we're identifying with the body and seeking happiness through that? Is that the duality that's being referred to?
The duality is thinking that I am the body, and that I have to serve the body, or I have to serve the senses of this body, rather than Krishna's senses. Krishna is the owner of our senses. He's called Hrishikesh. Now, when you serve the owner of the senses, you're actually serving the root of you're working for Krishna's pleasure and not your own. And because Krishna is the soul of our soul, there is no fault in working for Krishna's pleasure. Whereas if you're working for your own sense gratification, because our senses are temporary, that won't lead to any permanent result, any permanent happiness. Just like a man works hard all day for his own sense gratification, but he can't work all week. So he has to have some time off on the weekend. And so that's called bhoga tyaga, enjoyment and recurring enjoyment and renunciation. And so then after the weekend's over, he goes to work again. But he's never satisfied, because it's not a permanent happiness. But Kṛṣṇa consciousness is always happy, because if you satisfy Krishna's desire, then you'll always be happy too. So it's just, it's a temporary thing. And also it's frustrating, because you can never, just like try to meditate, like all these so-called yogis, they sit in there, meditate on the void or whatever. They can't even sit still for like a half an hour. But then after they do their meditation on the void or whatever, then, what do they do after that? They go out and eat meat and smoke cigarettes and do all kinds of nonsense. And then they go work again and do whatever. So this kind of meditation is useless, and it's not on a steady plane. Only on the platform of Kṛṣṇa consciousness can you work and be ever increasingly happy. in the Śikṣāṣtaka prayers, it goes, you know, Ananda Buddhi Vardhanam. It's an ever increasing ocean of transcendental bliss. Do you know any happiness in this material world that is unlimited? You know, whatever you do, it's going to have a beginning and an end. And so Lord Rishabhdev tells his sons, don't take pleasure in the pleasure that there is some pleasure there in the material world, you know, that have to do with contact of the body and their senses, but don't do that because it's temporary. And engage in austerities and renounce this material sense gratification, which is only duality. The idea of duality is that in the material world, everything is dual. Emerson talks about this in his essay on karma called Compensation. He says that, you know, you can't have an inside without an outside. You know, people try to separate what is pleasurable or profitable from what is miserable or, you know, detrimental. And they try to put everything on one side of the table and knock off all the detrimental stuff from the other side of the table. But you can never do that any more than you can have light without darkness, or an inside without an outside. He says, part the water with your hand and it reunites behind your hand. You know, try to drive one side out with a pitchfork and it comes running back. You know, it's impossible because this is a world of duality. But when you're in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, there is no duality anymore, because whatever you do is selfless. Whenever you're selfish, it's always going to come around and bite you in the ass. So if you work for Kṛṣṇa, though, Kṛṣṇa will always encourage you and give you more and more service to him, for his pleasure and for his he always will engage you in his service if you approach him and just give yourself to him in an innocent way, with no motive and no other agenda but his agenda. That's what it means to surrender. But that's the idea of duality. In the material world, there's always duality, but in the spiritual world, there's no duality, and there's no karma either. A karma is either good or bad, but on the spiritual plane, it's akarma. There's no karma, good or bad. You get rid of both of them. Does that answer a question?
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to read this one? Why don't you go ahead and read the next one?
X13. Sarva karmani manasa sanyasyaste sukham vashi navadvare pure dehi naiva kurvana karayan. Synonyms: sarva, all; karmani, activities; manasa, by the mind; sanyasya, giving up; aste, remains; sukham, in happiness; vashi, one who is controlled; navadvare, in the place where there are 9 gates; pure, in the city; dehi, the embodied soul; na, never; eva, certainly; kurvan, doing anything; na, not; karayan, causing to be done. Translation: when the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done. Purport: the embodied soul lives in the city of 9 gates. The activities of the body, or the figurative city of the body, are conducted automatically by its particular modes of nature. The soul, although subjecting himself to the conditions of the body, can be beyond those conditions if he so desires. Owing only to forgetfulness of his superior nature, he identifies with the material body and therefore suffers. By Kṛṣṇa consciousness, he can revive his real position and thus come out of his embodiment. Therefore, when one takes to Kṛṣṇa consciousness, one at once becomes completely aloof from bodily activities. In such a controlled life, in which his deliberations are changed, he lives happily within the city of 9 gates. The 9 gates are mentioned as follows.
I'll read the next paragraph.
Okay.
Navadvare pare dehi hamso lalayate bahi svasi savasi lokasya starvarasya charasya. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is living within the body of the living entity, is the controller of all living entities all over the universe. The body consists of 9 gates, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 1 mouth, the anus, and the genitals. The living entity in this conditioned stage identifies himself with the body, but when he identifies himself with the Lord within himself, he becomes just as free as the Lord, even while in the body. Śikṣāṣtaka Upanishad 3:18. Therefore, a Kṛṣṇa conscious person is free from both the outer and inner activities of the material body. You know, David Pandit, he comes to the Kirtan Center and plays the guitar. He wrote a song called "The City of 9 Gates." It's like a blues song. He actually wrote this song. He wrote a whole album based on Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. You ever heard of that book?
Yes, I have.
Kirtanananda, my spiritual master, he wrote a thing called Pilgrim's Progress, not Pilgrim's Progress, but what was the name of that book? Journey to the City of God or something. But anyway, it has all these analogies in it. And it's really, it's based on that John Bunyan thing. Here's a little bit, here's the first part of that song by David Pandit. It's a blues song. Radhanath Swami, when he heard this song, he liked it so much that he listened to the whole tape. He was trying to grab the headphones. He thought he would be like, but Radhanath Swami, he's a famous guru from India, but he used to play, he's from Chicago. He's from the south side of Chicago, and he actually plays the harmonica. He plays the blues, There's some videotape of him playing the harmonica. And, but anyway, he loved that album. It's one of my favorite albums. It's like a blues song. I'll just give you the first like 5 or 10 minutes of it, or 5 or 10 seconds of this here, the first line anyway. Let me tell you a story to tell mine apart. On a man from New York City, here's how it started. He cared quite a bit and was overtaken by the weight. So he left his wife and 5 children back in the city of 9 gates. He left his wife and 5 children back in the city of 9 gates. His wife is the mind, his 5 children is the senses, and the city of 9 gates is the body, So it's like an analogy. Text 14. Na kartavyam na karmani lokasya srijati prabhu na karma phala samyogam svabhavas tu pravartate. Synonyms: na, never, kartritvam, proprietorship, na, nor, karmani, activities, lokasya, of the people, srijati, creates, prabhu, the master of the city of the body, na, nor, karma phala, with the results of activities, samyogam, connection, swabhava, the modes of material nature, tu, but, pravartate, act. Translation: the embodied spirit, the master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Purport: the living entity, as will be explained in the 7th chapter, is one of the energies or natures of the Supreme Lord, but is distinct from matter, which is another nature called inferior of the Lord. Somehow, the superior nature of the living entity has been in contact with material nature since time immemorial. The temporary body or material dwelling place in which he obtains is the cause of varieties of activities and their resultant reactions. Living in such a conditional atmosphere, one suffers the results of the activities of the body by identifying himself in ignorance with the body. It is ignorance acquired from time immemorial that is the cause of bodily suffering and distress. As soon as the living entity becomes aloof from the activities of the body, he becomes free from the actions as well. As long as he is in the city of the body, he appears to be the master of it, but actually he is neither its proprietor nor controller of its actions and reactions. He is simply in the midst of the material ocean, struggling for existence. The waves of the ocean are tossing him, and he has no control over them. over them. His best solution is to get out of the water by transcendental Kṛṣṇa consciousness. This alone will save him from all turmoil. Just like a conditioned soul thinks he's in control, but he's actually in the control of material nature. Nobody's in control. You think you're the creator, you think you're the proprietor, you think you're the master of your body or your family or your nation. You even think you're, we the people of the democracy of America. That's the big illusion of democracy. The people are thinking that they're in control of the democracy, but actually all the people who are voting are controlled by the modes of material nature. So who's in control? It's just like a bull who's tethered by a rope in a ring on his nose, and the material nature is pulling the bull one way, and the bull's thinking, oh, I'm the big bull, I'm going to go this way. And then the rope is pulled the other way, and the bull thinks, okay, well, now I'm going to go that way. He thinks he's in control, but he's not in control of anything. And the waves of the material ocean are like tossing him and turning him. And the only way to get out of this illusion of this material existence, which is a struggle, is just to get rescued by Kṛṣṇa. And that's the only way out. You can't cross the ocean of material existence by yourself, or by the help of your family. Prabhupada calls that like trying to cross the ocean by grabbing onto the tail of a dog. The dog, it can swim, but you're not going to get all across. You're not going to be able to cross the ocean of material existence by dragging grabbing the tail of a dog. That's not going to work. It's not sufficient to carry across the ocean. So the real solution is to get rescued from the ocean by some superior help and get on the boat the boat is this body, and the Vedas are the winds, and the spiritual master is like the captain, and the winds are the Vedic literature. And this material body is like a boat that can cross over the ocean of material existence, but we have to get out of the water first, and we have to take advantage of the facilities that Kṛṣṇa gives us in the form of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra in order to get us across this ocean. Because especially in the Kali Yuga, there's so much suffering and so much illusion that we don't even know where we're going. And actually everybody, even the whole society, is like a whole it's like a boat without a captain. There's another one of my favorite songs on that album is called a boat, like a dog without a master, it's called. It's another blues song, and it goes like a dog without a master in a ship without a captain aboard, like a dog without a master in a ship without a captain aboard, you'll be living in illusion till the day of bow down to the Lord. It's really a good song. It's like a slide guitar, and everybody thinks that he's the controller and he can do whatever he wants to, but you have to have superior strength in order to cross the ocean. Kṛṣṇa says this material nature is very difficult to surpass on one's own, but when you surrender unto me, you can cross over this ocean. This whole ocean of material existence becomes like a little puddle that's contained in the footprint of a calf as soon as you surrender to Kṛṣṇa. Otherwise, it's not possible to cross over the material ocean. So we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time already.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But thank you very much again, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
Okay,
Hare
sounds
Krishna.
good. Hare Krishna.
Haribo.